Welcome to Unmasking Social, where we talk about building real friendships and meaningful connections without masking who we truly are. I'm your host, Sharon Baum, a speech and language pathologist with an expertise in social thinking and how it relates to autism and ADHD, specifically with our teens and tweens. Let's dive in. Hello. So have any of you ever wondered why things are just so complicated in our educational systems in terms of figuring out rules and procedures and what your children or you as a neurodivergent individual are entitled to? Well, it is very complex. And on today's episode, we have two wonderful parent advocates. They demystify some of the processes and also give tips and strategies for neurodivergent folks, for professionals, and for families in terms of how to navigate a complex educational system that has so much red tape when it comes to accommodations and all things related to special education. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to Unmasking Social. Today, we are going to have a fun, enjoyable podcast because the two people that are on the podcast today have a very special place in my heart. They're not just parent advocates, but they're also mentors to me. They have been my mentors for quite some time, and their empathy and their commitment to children and their families is something that I've never seen before. We have Jenn and Ann Cunningham here. Jenn, I just wanted to say hello and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It didn't just start at Parent Advocacy. It started as you being a parent first, being a writer, a very successful writer for Forbes magazine, and now being a parent advocate whose name really everybody knows in New York City.
Oh, thank you.
The it girl.
Yeah, no, Ann's a Westchester it girl.
I want to say this quickly because it could go on, and that's my biggest problem. I just go on and on.
I do it too.
However, I guess like the short way to put it is before children, BC, I was a publicist, right? And I loved my job, but then I had children. And around the same time that I noticed my eldest, who was 3 years older than my youngest, I noticed that they were having challenges. The first challenge was integrating into a nursery school. He was about to be kicked out.
Oh, wow.
Now, how do you get kicked out of nursery school? Is that like a possible thing?
Yeah.
Long story short, I realized that both of my children had disabilities and I quit my job because I didn't want to get fired because I realized there was so much work involved. And we just decided to take a gigantic pay cut of zero, no more money for me coming from my end, and decided to delve into how to help my children get the services they need. And that was a lot of learning to do. Plus, while I'm learning, I might as well learn what's going on with them. What is their disability? How can I help them at home? So many things to learn. That's what led me to start writing. And at first, I started writing because I had a nervous breakdown. I thought I was having a heart attack, but I had a nervous breakdown.
Sorry, Jenn, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's but I loved writing. I was a publicist. I loved writing. And so I sort of had a blog about parenting children with disabilities. And I think my first blog post was named Clonopin.
I love that.
And then,
I'll get your attention.
And because it's really hard. And then I just I morphed into a blogger who wrote about occupational therapy, speech therapy, all the toys that you can use with occupational therapy because the OTs know the best toys. And then that led to writing. So I got a little corner within Forbes.com to write about toys. I was hired by other places to write about toys, but I realized that wasn't a very lucrative job. Not that I was trying to make money because I was still a full-time parent advocate for my family.
Right.
But I just realized I should try to do something else. And when one of my children left private school to go to public school, that's when that IEP really counts. Not that private schools don't use IEPs very well, but like public school parents, the to the letter, to the checkbox, to everything, public school IEPs really, really matter. The
Yes.
words, everything matters.
Yes.
And so I wasn't used to that. And I had a friend who I had hired to help me, and she was genius. Her name's Amber Decker. She's still a genius.
I know, Anne.
And I said, could you train me? Because I want to do what you do. And so we started a business together with another great friend of mine. We're all still really great friends, even though I'm on my own now. And that's how I got here.
Wow.
I hope that was short.
Yes. No, yes. That's over. Yeah.
I went from publicist to writer about toys. And like, if you have children with disabilities, you're going to know toys because they are so useful to you. And then I just became an advocate. I didn't really know a lot because I didn't really need to use my IEP very much, except to say, this is no good and I need to be a private school. And then my kids though, but like after my kids went to public school, I really needed to learn. And all the stuff that I learned, I decided to share with my clients.
Yeah. And you're willing to share it with everybody who needs it, because I know some people don't have those advocates. But you touched upon two really interesting things, because I've had parents on this podcast who felt like they needed to stay at work because they needed that distraction because there was so much going on at home when they had a child with a disability. And then there are parents like you who say, no, I need to stay at home because this is where my focus needs to be. So I just want to commend both style of parenting, because both are really, really hard to do. To give up work, especially something that you love, and just pour fully into your children is so hard, especially because you really enjoyed what you were doing. It wasn't like you just had a job and you were walking away from it. So I do commend that, but I also commend those who need that distraction to fully be present as well. And you also mentioned how navigating the New York City public school parent advocacy piece can be difficult because just the policies are challenging. And so, Anne, I would love to hear from you, because our paths crossed a while back when I was on your podcast, Family Therapist Connection. And
Yes,
I immediately felt like you and Jen were cut from the same cloth. I could tell right away that you guys would be fast friends, but I never really formally introduced you. So here you are on the podcast together, but you have spoken before. So Anne, I would love to hear your story. I know that we share the connection of being in special education, having that background. And I know that that led you into this parent advocacy. So can you tell us a little bit about how that developed in Westchester?
Oh, absolutely. So I pursued an education in education. I'm certified birth through 21 in New York State and special ed in Connecticut State. And I went in with the intention of supporting parents and students through education to have a better quality of life. And to me, that meant taking our students with dyslexia and helping them, teaching them reading and building skills that were needed in life. My dreams of being an educator who touched the lives of children or students really came to a crushing halt when I quickly realized schools were more focused on test scores. Test scores, test scores, test scores. We were just pushing kids through. I would attend in Connecticut PPT meetings, in New York, there's CSE meetings. And in advance, we would be told we could not bring up or discuss certain things at the meetings. Parents didn't know what they could ask for or what their child was entitled to. So I thought, oh, you know what? I'll just become an administrator. So I became an administrator. And I thought that's where I was going to, well, that was shattered. That hope and dream was shattered. I was working in a charter school. And as you may or may not know, depending on the number of hours a child with an IEP receives, that's how much money the charter school will.
Okay.
So if 40% of a student's day requires support from a special ed teacher or something or someone, a charter school gets more money. So we had a group of students who really needed to be in a self-contained class. But when you look at the budget and you're paying a teacher a salary and he or she's only working with 8 students, when you could have that special educator working with doing co-taught or a resource room, economically, suddenly we weren't being honest about students who needed to be in self-contained and IEPs are being changed. So I left. I decided if I were to meet my maker, I could not say that I really made a significant change in anybody's life. But this is what I want to say to Jenn. And this is what I have said to other parents who have a story similar to Jenn's, that they had this thriving career in a whole other world. Then they found themselves with these children who needed their love and support. And they needed a parent who was on it to make sure they received the interventions needed to exceed and succeed. The skill set parents bring from their BC before children, some parents may have done amazing things like Jenn. And she took that previous life and skill set and, look what she did and look who she became, especially to the moms. 3 cheers for so many moms who have had to pivot in the name of love and support for their children. I could just go on and on about how amazing moms are.
I'm going to start crying. Oh my gosh.
Well, it's true,
Molly,
though.
we're all going to cry together soon because I think...
But it's so true. You brought this amazing skill set with you. And this is a word you used before, Sharon. You have to pivot. And moms pivot and they knock down walls for their kids. So what I started to notice, though, is at CSE meetings, parents don't know what they don't know. And I realized I had to pivot with the skill set and the education I had. And then if I ever meet my maker, I can say, yes, I helped kids.
Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, I just love that because I can connect to that. I think Jenn can connect to that. 3 passionate people that are here together that think about meeting our maker and making sure that what we did is honest and ethical and purposeful. Yeah. And sometimes systems that are in place don't always have the components interacting in a way that is always going to serve the child, which is something that when someone just asked me actually recently, it was actually an interview question for a job, but someone asked me recently, what is the most frustrating thing at your job? And I said, a speech language pathologist, I love my job. I couldn't think of one frustrating thing. Then I dug deeper and I realized, wait, my entire career has been in education. And the one thing that frustrates me is the systems that are broken. And that is where you guys come in, is trying to at least make a dent in what is broken so that children and their families can succeed. So I would love to hear from you about what you really can accomplish with our neurodivergent teens and tweens and children in general that is different from what we hear, because I've been on both sides of the table as a speech pathologist and as an administrator, which is there's a parent advocate coming in. Be very careful, right? There's this kind of fear culture of that parent advocate is going to make you do X, Y, and Z. And then the way you're explaining it is that you're trying to empower people. You're trying to empower families so that they know their rights and that so the kids get the right support. So can you fill the audience in on what you actually are trying to do with these neurodivergent children?
And you go first.
Okay.
That was like so hard.
Jenn, I was about to graciously extend that to you.
Oh, I could do it.
I can do it. Whatever works for you. But
oh gosh, I think that there's like too many answers to that big question. So like maybe Ann and I can just split that in half.
Sure, 50. That works.
Mean, the issue really is, first of all, Ann had said something really important prior when she was talking about what was frustrating her was how decisions were basically being made.
Yes.
And that is not the law. But then we are advocates of parents, children, so are teachers. at school. They are also advocates, but we do have this like elephant in the room that says decisions are made in a way that is like the words are attainable. You know, sometimes what is attainable is actually the consideration of what the district can afford
Right.
becomes an issue. However, no one's allowed to mention that in the room.
Mm.
And so perhaps what an advocate can do is bring that out into the conversation. We don't have to say to the district people, right? Because everybody's in a team, but like there are people from the district, there's a district representative, there's a teacher, there's a psychologist, whatever. We don't have to go and point to their face and say, I know you're doing this because you can't afford more.
Right.
I mean, because that's like saying you're racist. And like, you know, there's people who are racist that don't know they're racist,
Mhm.
you know, so like this is not a great conversation to have.
Right.
You're only going to get somebody to push back and say to you, I'm definitely not doing that.
Right.
So what the advocate can help do is bring out those tough conversations in a way where their experience says to you, let's try to talk about these tough issues in a way that everybody can pitch in and you can try to get the most out of it. Because at the end of the day, we are all supposed to be on one team.
Yes.
But we also have to remember that there's only one person that pays for all of that, and that is the district. They get to decide what goes on the IEP. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, they get to decide. So
Right.
what you can do for your families is just share, okay, you're going to decide, but I'm going to say what I have to say. You're going to have to write that down somehow because like that is the process. And so I guess in a long story short, like, you know, we're helping parents understand the process, use the process, because the process is pretty good. The rules are good. The
Yeah.
law is good.
Yes.
And we just have to exercise that out because there is the status quo,
Mhm.
the financial burdens that are faced by the staff and how that makes them do certain things to the extent where they forgot sometimes like why they're doing this because it just becomes like, oh yeah, in this situation, we have to give it like this because we can definitely not afford that.
Mhm.
Nobody does that. You hear that a lot. Nobody
Right.
gets this. That's very rare when it's, and so that's basically it. I feel like that is our job to make those hard conversations come into play and then document everything that is wrong.
And I think what you just said is reality. No, but
Yeah.
I think what Jen just said is very true. It's the law, but when it comes to budget, that's reality. And being in these meetings, I believe it is my responsibility to make sure the student gets what is appropriate, right? God forbid we ever want the best. We never want the best for kids. You want what's appropriate.
Right.
And that requires us having those very, very hard conversations, looking at the school data, looking at parental data. And when I say data, I mean academics, attendance, discipline records, and using that data. Oh, and parent data, how your child responds to doing homework at home,
Mhm.
right? Does your child come home and have a complete meltdown? Does your child come home and tell you that they're alone and they don't have friends or they're being bullied? But we have to look at that data. And as advocates, we have to insist upon having that conversation of what is an appropriate program. And I was just listening to Jen. You're so lovely. You're like, we're a team and we're going to work together. And I'm like, wait, you didn't answer my question. Please come back and answer my question. Can you please note in the minutes, you did not answer my question. Would you like me to restate my question? And I don't mean to be so forthright, but I have learned I don't always get responses and appropriate programs when I'm lovely. And it's not that I'm not lovely, but I'm just a matter of fact. But it's uncomfortable to be that. But sometimes you have to be that.
Yes. And I can relate to both of you because sitting on the other side of the table as working for the district,
Right.
I have to sit down in the meetings and also do what I feel is appropriate. Even though I'm not the parent advocate, I am the child advocate, right? So, and I also can fall into difficult conversations, difficult scenarios because I'm kind of faced with similar types of obstacles. And sometimes there will be a parent advocate in the meetings, and everyone has like a different style, just like every administrator in the district has a different style. But what I'm hearing from both of you, and you said that you're being tough, but I don't know if I perceive it as tough. Maybe it's because Jen and I are just New York City folks and things are a little rougher here. I know that you were in New York City and for a time, but things that I mean, I am from Brooklyn, from the trenches, things get tough around here. But it sounds like what you're doing is you are not really getting on the defense, which is something that I think is hard for anybody at some of these tense meetings where kids need these supports. The supports aren't available. Financially, there's an issue, and then everybody starts getting defensive. But it sounds like both of you are doing an excellent job at just stating the facts, saying this is what is appropriate. You may have not heard my question, so I'm going to restate it and in your words, but this is what it is, as opposed to saying you're doing this wrong. Or as Jen said, oh, I'm not going to say, well, you can't afford it, so you're not going to give it, because that will put the person on the defense. So I feel like that could also be something that builds a bridge with the people at the meeting because they don't feel like they have to suddenly get on the defense. I don't know if that always obviously works, but it just seems like maybe that can help buffer these like very difficult conversations where everybody feels like they're stuck. The district administrator feels stuck. The family feels stuck a lot of times. And then the child, which I want to ask you about, is not necessarily there. So I'm curious to hear from you as parent advocates. You say that there are accommodations that are missing many times, and the child is not necessarily going to get the best, but you want them to get the appropriate accommodations. So if we look at these appropriate, exactly. But many times it's very hard to even get that, whether it's a lack of funding or it's a meeting that just didn't go well because there are many evaluations and many different people with different perspectives. Sometimes where the perspectives don't align, you'll have a parent perspective, you'll have an evaluation perspective, you'll have the eval rep chime in. Sometimes there are so many voices that are making it really noisy, but the child isn't even there. And isn't the child a member of the team? Shouldn't the child be a member of the team? Shouldn't the child be able?
Well, I have, if I can jump on this,
Yeah.
Jen, yes, after a certain age, a child should attend their CSE meeting. However, I believe that the students, they're teenagers, right? And developmentally, they're going through so much and their self-esteem, their self-worth. I think it's important that students come in for a part of the meeting and they're guided by their parents or the advocate. I work with students on preparing what they want to share, but we let them share what they want to share, what works for them, what does not work for them. And then when it comes to some intense discussion about a student's strengths and weaknesses, I don't think the students should be there for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they should absolutely have a voice.
Yes, a voice, but you don't want to necessarily include them when you're talking about what they're not good at, because that could compromise their confidence.
So let's just say we're reviewing the WISC scores.
Yeah.
And they're going through and they're like verbal comprehension, below average, working memory, below average. We don't need a kid hearing that.
Right.
I agree with Anne. I do want the students to participate, but just like the parents, they're read their rights before an IEP meeting, and the way they're read their rights almost sounds like Miranda rights. It just not fun,
Yeah.
You can't expect the students to understand how they're supposed to participate. And I actually teach about how to bring a student into an IEP meeting. And one of the first things I like to tell everybody at the meeting is, do you know of any meeting for any adult where every single sentence is spoken about you? you
Hmm.
know,
It's intense.
and like really in front of people, and some of them you don't even know them, because that
Right.
happens at an IEP meeting. Like
Yeah.
I haven't. Parents don't meet the school psychologists maybe once every 3 years, and so
Yeah.
like the student will never have met that person possibly, and so like you're going into a room, every sentence is spoken about you. Even sentences about you doing well make you cringe, because this is
Yeah.
highly uncomfortable.
Oh, yes.
And so like if you think about what meeting is there for a student, for any adult, where every single sentence is spoken about you in a group setting, and that's really a celebrity roast,
Mm.
Oh,
an
dear.
intervention on drugs, and maybe like an interview.
Jay, you're on a roll
in
today.
academia. In
Yeah.
academia, there's
True.
like a group interview
Yeah.
sometimes, but like
Right.
seriously,
Yeah.
there's nothing.
Right.
You're
Right.
expecting a student, possibly with a neurological disability, come in at age 14, 15 and participate.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
how? And the school, I feel for this school. They don't have a lot of time to participate. In New York City, usually you just get a little letter saying, think about what you want to do when you grow up. And like, where will you live? And like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I'm sorry. No. And so like Anne and I, we will prepare our students, and depending on their needs, we will probably like say like, they're not going to come in. They're just going to read a statement and leave. Or they're going to come in, they're going to say their piece, and they're going to come back. So I'm not really quite sure, but like it really depends on the issue. I think what we should talk about that you mentioned, Anne, was the consensus at these meetings. You really cannot, if you're going to disagree on stuff, because you can't establish a consensus.
Inviting children and especially teenagers, like Anne was saying, to the meeting can be useful, but at times can be also detrimental, because you actually had some really funny comparisons. Jen, your sense of humor doesn't go unnoticed, but about how, like, I forgot what you said about inviting somebody to what was it? Something with
Celebrity roast.
a celebrity roast, right? Where you get to hear, right? All the good
Yeah.
things and bad things, and everybody's speaking about you. And so that could be super uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's so hard to balance, Anne and Jen, because we want our teens, our tweens especially, as they're getting older and they can advocate, because that's the goal of all of this, is to get them to advocate socially, is to actually have a voice, right, in their learning. So I feel like it's like a really super tough balance to have, because you want them to have a voice, but at the same time, you don't want them to feel like Jen said, like they're at a celebrity roast.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. So including them so that they know they're part of the team. Because I had somebody on this podcast, actually, an audiologist, that said that a lot of people are operating in silo instead of working collaboratively. And as Jen knows, I worked in a very specialized program that was very collaborative. So that's all I knew from a young age in my career, is that you have to work together in order to get results. But then what ends up happening in a lot of times is everyone's working in silo. The occupational therapist, the speech pathologist, the parent, and the school psychologist, and the collaboration, for whatever reason, isn't always there. But then the audiologist, this is why I brought this up, made mention, and then you have the child, who's the biggest part of the team, that's also siloed out. So I guess there's a way to include, but to include them in a way where they don't feel like they're being put on the spot, I guess.
I'm very, very guarded and careful with the students I work with. And as Jen said, she does, I do as well. I prepare the students to share what works for them when they're learning, their learning style, what makes them anxious, whatever we're identifying to help write the IEP. But when it gets to a certain point, usually the meetings are virtual now, I'll text a parent and say, you may want to ask your child to leave the meeting now, because we know what's coming. We know what's coming. And it could be very hard to hear. We have, our tweens and teens are so precious and beautiful and fragile. As Jen said, you're being roasted by people and educators and evaluators you don't know. They don't need to hear that.
Yeah. And that was just a curious question I had, and I'm glad that you clarified that, because a lot of times this comes up where people are asking, where are the children? Where are the children? how come they're not at the meeting? But like you explained it in a way where it makes sense, where again, you don't want a child to feel like they're on display. I wouldn't feel comfortable if I was at a party and everybody was telling me all my strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I'm okay with feedback, but to a point, guys, right? To a point. And to that point of this teen and tween being such a precious time. And I know Jenn had her kids already go through the teen and tween period. And I know, Jenn, I'm sure there were moments that you wanted to pull your hair out, and there were moments that you wanted to really celebrate with such a joy because of their accomplishments. And Anne, I know that you're seeing a lot of families with these teens and tweens that are neurodivergent or may have ADHD, autism with ADHD. And I don't know if you're observing the same things or if you could speak to this as a parent advocate, but sometimes I've been in meetings where I just feel that the reports are not reflective of what's really going on socially. And so then the child isn't necessarily receiving or recommended for accommodations that support the social piece. Is there a specific way that you advocate for social?
Yes.
Okay.
And this gets back to parental data collection.
Yes.
And I give a little workshop on the data parents should collect. It includes academic, social, emotional, and behavioral. Schools do not always report incidences their child may have, because if you're a middle school teacher or a high school teacher, you see certain student acts so often, it's just part of that school environment, right? Snubbing someone, ignoring them, turning their back on them, on another student. I encourage my parents to collect their own data.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a few ways to do that. And one is if you have a child who can articulate how their day went. Now, when a tween or a teenager shares how their day went, we have to account for a part of it there might be some embellishments or more of an emotional response to what actually happened. But you want to know what happened during your child's day. I ate lunch alone again today. And I tell parents to keep a log, do your data or data collection. The other way is on an IEP under accommodations, you can have a homeschool communication log. And that can be that marble notebook, or that could be a Google Doc.
We used to use those. I remember when the program first started, I don't think they use those anymore, but those were great. Those back and forth communication notebooks. Jenn probably received some notes from me, but yeah, that's for another time. Yeah.
But that's how I encourage parents to collect their own data. Don't go into those meetings. Don't go into those meetings without your own data.
I totally love everything Anne said, because data should never be ignored. And the truth is, so many times, especially for students with an IEP in which they are diploma bound, I think everything then relies on, is the student on grade level or not, right? And is the student going to graduate or not, or graduate on time? As I don't even know what this on time really mean, is unless we're defining it from somebody who's neurotypical.
Right.
And you're supposed to graduate when everybody else graduates, right?
Yeah.
All of these things are like not necessary. They're not real. It's only just one data point. And I think what we were saying earlier about having a hard time at the IEP meeting, one of the biggest reasons to have a hard time at an IEP meeting is because we can't reach a consensus on what is the definition of appropriate progress in accordance with their unique strengths for that particular individual. So if I have an IQ of 120 above, which can happen.
Yes.
And then, but the student is getting C's.
Yeah.
They're still passing.
Right.
But for somebody with an IQ of 120 and above, what is that? Like, that's not 98th percentile. That's like 95th percentile, 93rd percentile and above, right?
Mm-hmm.
I should know this, but I don't.
Well, this field might be somewhere. But like, what I'm trying to say is, if they have above average IQ,
yes,
I'm going to expect above average grades. But like, gosh, if you say that out loud, somebody's going to look at you like you expecting your child to go to Harvard. You know, that's not fair.
And why wouldn't you expect your child to go to Harvard if
Right.
They
That's
have
what we
that
want.
ability
Yeah.
and
trying to have
capacity.
that conversation, and then it'll turn into an issue where you're almost encouraging these people to say, everybody wants their child to go to Harvard, or everybody wants their child to go and get A's. But that's actually not the point. Is if we can't all decide what is the definition of appropriate progress for this child, then you are going to be looking at this measure, and I'm going to be looking at this, and we're never going to meet, and we're always going to be fighting. And what was that? The soft bigotry of low expectations. That is,
Yeah.
that was something that was used to talk about no child left behind. But in a sense, it is actually an excellent saying, because our children as students with disabilities, because nobody will have that talk, nobody will talk about what is appropriate progress for this child.
Right.
Nobody wants to say it out loud, because it's too high. They actually don't know. They actually think grade level is appropriate progress, and they would be wrong.
Right.
But they actually don't know.
Brilliantly put.
Yeah, it sounds like to me like we're still operating, unfortunately, in many cases from that deficit model. We want to see how delayed somebody is as opposed to how advanced they are and what their potential really is and why their potential is being hindered. And this brings me into my next point, which is really related to the neurodivergence and the social piece, which is we also have our twice exceptional students. I know, Jen, you've given many presentations on that. And I know, Anne, you also work a lot on that. And I've spoken even to Jen about this because the twice exceptional students, when it meets autism, because sometimes it co-occurs, and Jen, somebody where that co-occurs. And a lot of times the stereotype is the child's so smart, you come to this meeting and then no supports are given. So how do you handle a meeting like that?
That's basically because of that appropriate progress issue.
So how do you guys handle being a parent advocate in a meeting like that where you're being told consistently throughout the meeting that, well, look at the scores. The child's succeeding. The child's meeting their goals.
The child's accessing the curriculum despite their disability. That's a hard one.
Is there a way? Is there a magic pill? Because you guys are really amazing. So for any parent advocate listening, is there something magical not magical, but something that can help with this consensus? Because and Jen, you put it so well, this consensus is really what's getting in the way at every meeting, is arriving at this consensus. Is there a way to facilitate that? Because some people may not even have that education about twice exceptional or about how it impacts.
So the thing is that we expect anybody who is empowered to operate the IEP meeting, who's the representative of the district, who's supposed to go along the sequence of how this meeting is supposed to run, we're going to expect that they understand that services are supposed to be made in accordance with the student's unique needs.
Yes.
Right? And so all of those deficits, they all matter, right? But then you have to understand that the rest of the team has to understand that the deficits, when you look at the student's potential, because what's the point of taking their IQ down anyway? If it's not meeting their potential,
right,
then things will be a problem. So it's sort of like if I have a really strong hand and I have a very weak arm, then I'm going to I think I could pick up everything and squeeze it tight. But I may only be able to squeeze it tight if whatever I'm picking up is on the floor and I'm never picking it up. So, but everybody thinks I'm so strong,
right?
Because they've seen how hard I squeeze. So then now everybody's thinking, hey, this kid can do anything. But nobody recognizes that there's a weak arm and he can't pick up anything. He could just squeeze everything so tight. So they're just looking at the squeezing. They're looking at how hard the squeeze happens, and then they just miss the whole thing. But I think that many school teams, based on the fact that students were only looking for the most disabled, the most person who can't do the most in terms of what is average and not what is the purpose of the IEP, right? Because as long as we've decided that there's an adverse impact, they get an IEP, and then we're supposed to make it for them, not so that they can just be like above water like everybody
Right.
else. That's
Right.
not the purpose of it.
Agreed.
But sometimes these people who are running these meetings, they may know that in theory, like, oh yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. But in practice, they just don't do it.
Yeah.
You can
Right.
hear that because they're always saying at the beginning of the IEP meeting, well, he's above grade level, or if he's approaching grade level, which means he's below grade level. But
Right.
like they can't say it like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
You're pregnant or you're not. No, you're
Exactly.
pregnant or you're not.
Right.
You're
Right.
you're
But like,
at grade level or you're not.
Right. So this
But
is
then,
a lot of
you know,
black and
on
white
the
thinking.
reverse
Yeah.
side-
No shades of gray. There's
Yeah.
no shades of gray here.
if
Yeah.
about it like this, maybe there is a student who is below grade level and their IQ is also below average. And so
Yeah.
maybe that is appropriate progress for them
Mm-hmm.
after having received good services that were very well measured. And so we don't need to push them to some other classroom where they're not going to get access to grade level material, you know? So like we really have to reach consensus as much as possible on what is appropriate progress for that child, because that whole idea of low expectations, you know, not trying to figure out like what's the best that they can do, or what's the appropriate measure of what they could do, can actually work in the reverse by pushing kids and making them stay in some sort of place where like it's very restricted. They don't have access to a lot of different things. And so like that's what makes me so angry. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop talking.
No.
Some school districts throughout Westchester handle that very, very well.
So I want to hear
Handle-
about this. I want to hear about this. Let's play geography for a moment, if you can entertain it. And what's going on in Westchester that's not going on in New York City? What are some lessons maybe that we can learn?
The first thing we have to look at is the population. So in the New York City, include the 5 boroughs, I think it's between 8 and 9 million people, right? In like mere miles, right?
We're on top of each
West-
other.
Yes.
Too close for comfort. Yes.
And so let's just talk about Westchester County for a moment. They have about 1 million people. And it's far more space. They have very good programs. I assist families that are transitioning into New York from within our country or around the world, actually. And when they want to know what is an appropriate school district that will address their child's needs. And one thing coming into Westchester County, it can meet many needs because there are many wonderful programs. There are many wonderful programs in New York City, but per capita, was it per capita? The specialized school to the number of students who need it, those students exceed the number of seats available. In Westchester, it's a little bit more doable. Also, New York, Westchester County, right? So this is no secret. They're one of the wealthiest counties in the country. So you have parents who can retain attorney, can retain counsel. And after a very thorough review of files and scores, and this is again where parent data is so important. You want to keep your, like when schoolwork comes home, parents want to keep it. Because recently I was in a CSE meeting. The teacher brought these glowing pieces of writing the student had done. Glowing. Like almost like, why were we even here? Well, the mother pulls out all the drafts that it took to get there. And the spelling, the inability to write a sentence. And it was that data from the mom, that data collection, that those work samples that help that student get the services he needs. But in back to Westchester, though, parents can have many, not all at all, can afford to retain counsel to help them.
I'm so glad you said that's when I'm listening to you. And this is something that I do with my clients too. I also look for their writing samples and I look to, because that is really important data, especially if the parents have something to say about that data. However, in New York City, oftentimes, even if I bring that, it doesn't help. Like they'll still say, well, the final product's the most important thing, or there's always going to be something to say because the outcome is rather predetermined.
I agree.
There is really no team meeting. It's almost like a rehearsed,
Yes.
meeting.
Yes.
And that's why I like when an advocate can go in and sort of break their flow of their predetermined outcome, because sometimes that's all you can do for your client. Because if they're not going to do something, they're really not going to.
But I think we need to be fair. I think we need to be fair to educators. And when I refer to educators, I'm referring to the teachers. The teachers, I agree with you. It's not uncommon, sadly, that there is a predetermined determination. Like we already know what we're going to do. And my comment when I hear that is that's against the regulations. As a team, we are supposed to make that decision
At the meeting. Yeah.
at the meeting. We write the goals and then we determine the program that blah, all that. Teachers work well because they like kids, but also they have to keep a roof over their head. They have their own children to take care of. And when teachers are told what's going to happen in that meeting, they better keep their mouth shut or you could lose your job. As an advocate, I ask questions very directly to teachers. And I give a gentle reminder that this is all going to be in the minutes, so we all need to speak honestly. And I ask them very direct questions, and their responses. What reading level is the student at? Let's say it's a third grader, and they're doing DRAs, a 1-5 or a 15. Now, currently, let's say it's December. Yes. What were they in September? Oh, a 1-5. So now that we have that data, so I never corner a teacher because I understand that person has to make a living and they have been told by their superiors oftentimes to keep their mouth shut. So I ask teachers very direct questions to collect data that they alone may know. And then we take that data, that information, and that's when we have to the program that they may be suggesting, I can then take that data that they've shared and prove why their program they're proposing is wrong.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
And the nice part about it is there are times when that strategy really works because even though I think the go-to method is to predetermine the outcome, that there are some times when you have somebody like Anne come into the meeting, where she sort of rocks that boat. And it's not the teacher who's making that final decision anyway. And so the district will decide there's a lot of evidence here. We really can't do the predetermined outcome that I was thinking about and had a meeting with all of them about prior to meeting these parents and having the official IEP, right? Because they do have their little meetings prior to.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And so that said, though, I find that when you're in a place in a school, and this happens probably a lot more often in New York City than in other districts. Because I do notice that when I speak to other advocates and lawyers outside of New York City, that no matter what you do, and I'm not saying please give up, because I definitely don't.
Yeah,
and I
never give
definitely
up.
don't tell my, but no matter what you do, sometimes if they're really so predetermined, the best thing you can do for your client and for your family is to just start jotting down everything they didn't do or wouldn't answer or ignored, right? So because if they really don't want to do something, they're just not going to. And in New York City, unlike other cities, they welcome you to go file your due process complaint.
Oh, they will send you the forms.
Yeah,
Let me give you the link.
Yeah, you're invited.
And it's just but outside of New York City, when the advocate or the attorney says, we're going to file a due process complaint, a lot of times things change. But, in New York City, like, they're just like, okay, whatever. And I think it's because when you have the same problem happen over and over again, so like twice exceptional students, they're getting their needs are dismissed over and over again. There's like a pattern, right? In New York City, students who need Orton-Gillingham type of methodology, they won't get it. That's a pattern. But like, unless the district finds a way to resolve that issue on a wider basis, then the only way that issue gets resolved is through due process complaint.
Yeah.
So usually that means people who can afford to hire a lawyer, that's the inequity of special education. They can afford to hire a lawyer, so they do. So then their kids get something else. But otherwise, it's just not going to happen. And so that's one of the reasons why New York City, I think they take up over 95% of the impartial hearing costs of the entire state, even though they only have like 40 some odd percent of the students in the entire state. So while they have less than half of the students in the entire state, they take up over 90% of the impartial hearing costs for the entire state. And yet, we still don't have Orton-Gillingham instruction in every single public school.
Well, it's also just so unfortunate because listening to you both of you are individuals who aren't necessarily these scary people, right? That are trying to come into the meeting and trying to shake things up so that people are afraid. And I really hope that everybody that's listening to this podcast, because most people that listen to my podcast are people that care about the children, care about the social development, want teens and tweens to succeed, want the families to be empowered. I hope that they can understand that as parent advocates, your goal is to really just empower others. And your goal isn't to just sit in the meeting and put somebody on the spot. And like Anne was saying, like, you make sure to ask direct questions. I know people that have been in meetings with Jen, and she's been nothing but lovely. Even if in the moment you feel like you maybe want to maybe tear your hair out or there's other things going on, these meetings can be contentious. But circling back to how you handle this, what I really love about both of you, I mean, I love many things about you guys, but one thing that really I'm in awe of actually is your ability to maintain really great positive relationships with school districts and with school representatives and with people who are those higher ups that are making some of these policies, while also arriving at the meetings and really advocating for what's not being done. So I would love to hear how you're able to do that, because I find that to be super fascinating.
I think we need to identify that there are many, many wonderful, caring educators and supervisors and chair people. They're really, they are. And what I have experienced is that department head, that PPS director or CSE director is unaware of what's going on and that the parent is upset because they've only been dealing at the building level.
Right.
So once the supervisor gets involved, it usually is the first time they're hearing about it, or they've heard about it now that the meeting has been scheduled. But there are many wonderful supervisors and even some attorneys that are retained by school districts. There are some very ethical attorneys that I admire, and there are great people out there. There really are.
Right.
But I actually love what Anne's saying, because I have like the funnier part of this. I think that if there's like a superintendent or a supervisor that is coming in to sort of help out with the school because Anne called them, because I do that too, you know? You have to imagine that the supervisor might really welcome that call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Because they know that there's a problem at school A, but they cannot go and swoop in on school A because they know that they need someone to complain.
Yes.
And so Anne calls and they're like, on it. And this is why I really hope that parents complain. You don't always have to complain as a group, but you do have to complain. And so, because you don't know, there might be a teacher in that room that has been complaining about teacher Y. Teacher X is like, the teacher Y is causing all these problems and teacher Y is making your child cry.
Yeah.
And like, if we can get the supervisor to come and help teacher X get teacher Y some help, because really, like, I'm not thinking about firing anybody. Get that person help so they can do their job. Then hopefully more people will be happy, because you really want the child to stay at the school, be happy at the school. Hopefully that school is like in their neighborhood. They don't have to travel to go there. What you want it to work there. So you're trying to help people because supposedly they want what's best for the child too, and so it doesn't always work out like that.
Right.
But, I do want to say that there are some schools that really can't stand me. I just want you to know.
Same. Yeah.
Can't win them all. Then you wouldn't be doing your job well if all the schools loved you. It just, you're going to have to lose some people in this. But yeah.
Parent advocates are trying to model appropriate advocacy to their clients. So if I think that it is nice to be able to come into a meeting, recognize what's going well, but also say, I got to work on this, please, because that's what you want your parents to do. There might be some parents at a school where all they do is complain and they get everything, but you don't want your client to be like that.
Right.
You want your client to voice what's wrong, but at the end of the day, like, you also get what your child, what your client is doing will then be modeled by their child, So like if there's a child that if the client is only picking out bad stuff and getting their way because they're just cruel, the child will see that some way, somehow. And you don't want your child to do that because you don't want the issue of disability to be about how hard you can complain. It's really about first recognizing your rights, and then like, what can you do? But like, complaining is important.
Yeah.
But like, it is really about like recognizing their rights. And if you can recognize the teacher rights, because they have a right to do their job well, So that's how you're advocating, right? I want to help. Can you please help me help you by telling me what you need and what you can't do? If you can't do something, please tell me. That's the hardest thing for them. They cannot even tell it.
Right.
They're not allowed. I would get them to whisper to you, but they can't.
Yeah.
But like, if you can get these people to like, if you could share. Another thing that I think is very helpful that I'm sure, Anne, you encouraged them to do as well, is I encourage my clients to get involved with the school or involved in their community. I also get involved in my community. If I think that there is a problem of funding, then I will get up in front of city council or the school board and say, y'all have to fix this because this is causing everybody to do the wrong thing. And even if like that doesn't whittle down to the IEP meeting, right? Because that's like too big of an issue. The fact that you did that, it has to earn some respect, even if they never share it with you, because you're rooting for everyone, not just you.
Yeah. I have a father who shows up at Board of Ed meetings and speaks on behalf of the student body with disabilities. He is amazing. He has made great change.
You can't ignore people. That's hard.
And that's the thing about both of you, is that you're not just advocating for that one family. Whatever policy that you are trying to fight on behalf of is impacting other families down the road. And that's why, even though it's sad that there's this inequity, and you point to Westchester County rather, maybe having a little bit more money than some areas in New York City, at the end of the day, the impact that you're making for one family can really grow and develop. And because you both are just huge change makers. And not only that, but I mean, I've seen Jenn in action, just even out of the goodness of her heart, helping other children whose parents, and this is complicated, maybe weren't born in this country, don't really know how to navigate the special education policies. And the child then goes through school and they're entering college, which we always talk about, those transition periods, which are so hard, I'm sure, and about that piece of it. And at that point, you're trying to advocate, but it's late in the game and you're trying to get the kid to catch up. And I've seen Jen do that on just for her own children's friends. And so it's just so amazing to watch such goodness, just the empathy and that you're modeling for your clients and that they can model for their children. Because like Jen said, the advocacy that you model for someone, and I'm thinking about this from the social lens, is the advocacy that they're going to learn and that they're going to use. So if you're going to advocate in a way, I guess, where it's going to be constant complaints and like you said, Jen used the word cruel, I feel like maybe sometimes people maybe aren't trying to be cruel, but maybe it could come across as, okay, they're just entitled or they want this and this and this and this. Then the child's going to maybe learn that too in terms of the advocacy style. So I feel like that's such an important point that you both made about modeling that advocacy for others, because the advocacy that you're doing, others are learning. Mm-hmm. And then once the parents learn that, hopefully they can go out on their own and then continue to advocate for themselves and for their children. And
yeah, that's my goal. I would like to think that I help parents learn how to become their child's advocate. And the one thing that I see getting in the way of parents that they are concerned about is if they are too loud or if they complain or bring up issues too often, it will be taken out on their child. That is the number one primary concern of parents.
What do you say to them, Anne, about that?
So it goes back to that data collection. What do you see coming home? What is for some of our students, and I see this a lot with our students diagnosed with ADHD combined type, that after being in school all day and really trying to pay attention and stay focused, they come home and they are spent. They're mentally taxed, but they have homework. So homework can become a very trying time for a family. Mm-hmm. And I tell parents, contact your child's teacher, ask them how much time should they be spending on math, reading, writing, whatever it is. And you tell your child, I'm setting a timer for 10 minutes. And when the timer rings, you're done. Because that child does need a mental break. So parents grow concerned, though, if they send their child in with a partially completed, let's just say, math sheet, that they will be penalized. And I tell them, okay, so you communicate always in writing with parents, with teachers. This is what you're going to do because this is what you're seeing at home. And if the teacher is struggling to comply with that and starts marking your child's homework as complete or they're getting grades on the homework, you call for a program review. Okay, so we'll just take this to the CSE and we'll have it put on the IEP.
Wow, program review. I like those words. I think the issue with retaliation is really scary. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought it up, Anne, because
it terrifies them.
Yeah, especially for our students who doesn't matter what their IQ is, they might come home and say nothing, everything's the same every day. Mm-hmm. Like but there's going to be some retaliation somewhere, somehow. I don't see it very often for my clients. I don't, to be truthful,
either, but it is a concern for parents.
I'm sure it's real in certain places I can never guarantee it for anyone. However, what I can say is, in my experience, if you speak up, you're the first one to get served. Usually that's how it happens. The squeaky wheel will get that oil. That's the inequity of special education. If there's limited teacher time, but there is a parent that is constantly going, this is the IEP, isn't it? Are you supposed to do it? Like, it's just going to go that way. I'm sorry, but I think that's just what happens. But the other issue with retaliation is, because we can't guarantee that it won't happen, because there are people who just don't get it, is what do you want your child to learn? Because you're going to probably talk to them about their IEP one day. And they might ask you, like, weren't you ever afraid that there was going to be retaliation against you, against me? And do you want to tell your child, I didn't speak up because I didn't want it to come down. I didn't want to get hurt. I don't want to ever tell that story. even though the scary outcome could really truly happen. But like, I never want to make decisions out of fear.
Right.
Just like you don't want
Agreed.
your kids to make decisions out of fear.
Mhm.
So once you can share that with your family,
Yeah.
there's two things. There's, if I speak up, I'll probably be the first one served or one of the first served, because it's just, sorry, humans are just like that. But the second is, you don't want to teach your kid that.
Mhm.
You don't want to
Mhm.
do that. You don't want to model that. You might like keep it
That's
a
a good
secret,
point.
but like
Yeah.
it'll come out somehow through your pores. And so hopefully then we can like not go there.
Yeah.
But it is, no matter what, it is scary. It really is scary.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, not acting out of fear because you don't want your children to see that. But I understand, Anne, what you had said also about how that retaliation piece, especially for parents who are already more introverted and more passive. And I've seen that even with family members of mine where they're just more passive and they just want to let things go. And I have to tell them, please don't let this go because it's going to escalate. It's going to get bigger. And then the child ends up getting hurt, but they don't want to be that voice that's going to shake things up a little bit, even though they should be advocating. So I understand how hard it is, but there is a fear. The child's in this school. What's going to happen, right? Will they do anything? But to Jenn's point, what I've observed, and maybe, Anne, maybe you have a different perspective, just even from a geographical standpoint at Westchester, but I've also seen that, unfortunately, the ones who speak the loudest do get served first, which also, for me, kind of hurts my heart because the ones that don't know how to speak up or are too scared to speak up will sometimes never get served or like are saved for the last on the lunch line because people are scared of these escalations. People are, when they hear the word escalation's a buzzword, a trigger word, right? And so when they hear that Jenn escalated something, right, everybody's on it. If they hear Anne escalated something for a family, people are more likely to respond. So I see both sides of it, but it sounds like, unfortunately, the ones that aren't speaking up are the ones that are not getting what they need.
Yes, it is
So,
hard.
It's tough. It's really tough. Yeah.
Oh, before you go there, I wanted to tell you one quick story because like, I think that sense of entitlement, especially when you get to the older kids, and I'm sure you've seen it with your kids too, like after a while, the inequity of special education for our students, especially the ones who can observe lots of things going on, they see it. Like the kid next to me can't read very well or cannot write very well. What are you giving me all the services? Well, I had that done at an IEP meeting for a student who was, the student was sort of reluctant to take on services. But like, I mean, that was a spot on observation. Why am I the only one getting one-to-one services when the other kids get it too? But like, we have to remember that the student is, when they're in school, when they're at an IEP meeting, everybody in the room is required to continuously be providing services. That means that they are required to explain that to the kids. You don't have to explain it. The parents do not have to explain it. Go ahead, district representative, tell them why that is an issue.
Right.
You know, and like, you know, they'll probably say like, this is an IEP meeting. This is just for you. But like, and if that's all they say, then you can have a conversation with the student afterwards and say, that was spot on what you said. I love what you said because you're totally right. And like, this is how they grow up too. But it is so unfair. But I love that. I love that he's
They really do.
Yeah. They start noticing it. They do. And I know that even, they start thinking about others. I've seen it. There was a student who said, I think that child would benefit from some speech and language therapy. And the truth is that the child did need a screener. They did need a speech and language screener, but nobody was identifying it because, again, things get busy and hectic. So the advocacy, I love how the children start picking up on it. Jenn, including your children. If I do say so myself, Spencer advocating for others in need of AC devices and other things. Yeah.
Why don't you tell your speech therapist and then they'll work on it? I mean, it's so unfair because the law says that the district is supposed to investigate all areas of suspected disability, and they don't. And it ends up falling on the parents' shoes. And like, that is just not fair. But then, this system is not fair. Like, maybe Anne and I shouldn't really have jobs, but like the existence of our job is because the system is not treating people fairly.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, like, the people who can afford to hire us will get that service. And all of these other issues of discomfort have to be resolved as we work. And like, it is really unfair. One of the reasons why I make myself feel better is I'll go and I'll advocate for the entire community. But like, it's crazy.
Yeah, you literally, the whole Woodside, Queens is
really,
and
really
Jenn is
unfair.
the Assemblywoman.
It's just terrible.
I know, and I know how big your hearts are, both of you, and so and I also can feel like things very strongly. So I also feel so terrible when I know that kids are at a disadvantage just because of the economic or socioeconomic status that they're in, or just because of lack of knowledge that their parents have and just don't know. But the fact that you guys have such big hearts it shows through in the sense that you're not just helping that one kid. Like, Jenn, you're advocating on literally the entire Queens.
Student
Like,
the class,
every parent knows they can go to you.
Trickling in another way. First, the teacher knows, hey, this
helping
could happen,
the entire class,
and maybe the student's friend knows that this can happen. And the student's mother, hey, why can't I get this? Let's have a conversation. Like, it can happen that way. And sometimes, didn't you like start something when you got it for one student and then the other student who doesn't have an advocate? That must have happened, because it's just like, sometimes if you bring quality services to one child in the room, sometimes it can have that trickle.
It does.
I wish there was
it does. Yeah.
And I know, even just was speaking with you, is you don't withhold your advocacy from anybody. Anybody who reaches out to you, you try to support, regardless if they're your client or not. And that is what maybe sets you guys apart from maybe other parent advocates. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to compare, but you guys are on my podcast for a reason. I mean, I'm pretty selective with who I pick on. And so basically, this is what sets you guys apart. So I have one final question before I let you go. And I just want to thank you for giving me so much of your time, because I think all of this is such critical information, because again, the podcast is all about empowering. And what better way to empower people than for them to know, how are they going to navigate school? How can their children navigate school and get what is appropriate for them in times when, unfortunately, there are financial constraints. There's also a lack of education, but knowing that there are people like you out there can really help empower everybody. So thank you so much for sharing all of these stories while being entertaining and humorous as well throughout all of it. I think I'm going to quote some of these things, Jenn, that you said tonight. You were on a roll. But my closing question, this is a hard one, but I've seen both of you not just be parent advocate, but take advocacy to like a whole nother level where you really are like, you're really getting to a place of trying to change policy. So I'm not trying to say that you should run for mayor. You probably should both be running for mayor. We need 2 female mayors that can actually run the city, and maybe a governor that can run the state. But I just am curious, Jenn, you show up at City Hall and you write these long things, a testimony. I forget what they're called. Yeah, the testimonies that you write. Exactly. The testimonies. And I know, Anne, that you also write things in terms of as they relate to policy. Is there anything that you can reveal that you're working on now?
I can tell you that I am
as they pertain to kids
with people regarding the New York State Regents, that we have students who are intellectually disabled. And they would benefit from a program that really teaches them how to navigate life, how to know money, tell time, teach them work skills so they could have a good quality of life after the age of 21. And instead, they're taking the gosh golly darn bio Regents for the 3rd time. And the fact of the matter is,
oh man,
there are some students that will not benefit from knowing what a cell does. They will benefit from knowing how to ride the bus, how to be a good worker, how to interact with people at work, how to have a conversation, how to, if something goes wrong, how to handle themselves, how to call 911. The 11th grade ELA
How to call
Regents,
911, right?
passing it will never do anything for them. Oh, by the way, and they don't. So they take it 3 times.
It's so hard. And they're sitting through that test the entire time, trying so hard.
At
It's
a
so
first or second
exhausting.
grade reading
And then they
level.
have to do it again and then again.
They
It's
don't
just,
change anything to make them help them pass.
Oh, and I know, and
No, nothing.
With their time.
And then school districts are like, well, then we'll have to put them on AltaSets.
right, right,
Oh,
right,
who cares? So he won't graduate with a Regents diploma.
right.
Doesn't really
Alternatives.
matter.
That's what we had. Yeah,
Doesn't really matter.
Just wasted all this time.
yeah. Because those kids that I saw in the alternative assessment classes, that the kids that I saw as a speech pathologist in those classes, I felt were doing really well because they were learning functional life skills that they're going to need as they navigate life. And they didn't take the Regents. They didn't take any of those standardized tests. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's a world that we're still caught up in the test, but we have made progress. And you guys are showing that progress is made. So, Jen, what's cooking with you in terms of your next testimony or your, if any, upcoming policies that you are working on? If you can reveal it. I don't know if it's...
I've had a bone to pick with New York City Department of Education for a few years now on something in the way they fund special education services. They fund it per person, not per class. They fund it. So basically, the formula caps the number of funds that can go for a student. But then first funding point.
Is that the free formula?
That's not fair, though.
Fair student.
But
Okay.
the crazy part is, like,
I know about it through you.
How much a school gets for the special education's instructional services, how can you expect the school who is representing the district and making determinations on the child's IEP, how can you expect them to be fair when the district is being fair to the school, right? If this child needs to see a special education teacher for 100% of the day, not including lunch, why are you only paying for 60%? That's the cap. Who can pay the 40%? Nobody. The school. And that comes out of the school's budget, which then goes out whatever the school wanted to do, whether it was the office holiday party or whether it was the trip to Japan or whether it's the hydroponics app. That is now going to have to go to that one kid or the few kids. And it won't go to them because the school's never going to do it anyway. They're going to meet the child at the cap, not meet the child where they are. So,
good point.
So like this fair student funding formula in New York City is not fair. And it is basically a civil rights violation. Unfortunately, we don't have much of an Office of United States Department of Education Office of Civil Rights office anymore because of things.
Good
and,
God. That's the insanity.
And
the insanity.
Yeah, because that's where this thing would have gone.
We don't have, right, there's notes, right.
I have the emails, I have
data. You have the data. Both of you have all the lists. You have all the notes, right? Listed for you. Yeah.
Somebody cares.
I think it's just great. No, I think it's just great that both of you care so much that it's just not about parent advocacy for you. It's about policy in general. And the fact that I'm speaking to 2 wonderful individuals that care so much about children, it reinvigorates just my passion. You both have really reinvigorated like the passion that I've had. Honestly, starting this podcast is partially and thanks to you, Jen, and both of you, because when I was in a time where I was trying to get back in touch with my passion, I had to think back to what really mattered to me. And both of you made me realize what really mattered to me. And this is why I'm going to be a full-time speech pathologist again.
People really care.
So
there's a lot of people who really care, and they're actually really good at their job. I think public school has some of the best, amazing people.
Absolutely.
And they are limited in how much they can do.
Yeah.
They cannot show you their wealth of knowledge and all of their tips and tricks in their bag of special, amazing strategies.
Oh, right.
And
When your
like,
caseload is
But
too
Anne
big.
has to leave.
Yeah. The time constraints too. The time constraints are really rough on most of the educators. And the classes are very large, although I know that they're working on making them smaller. I know in Westchester, they're a bit smaller, but there's a lot of responsibilities on everybody. So I think it's just hard on all fronts. But that's where you guys come in, which is you remind everybody that, yes, it's hard.
Mm-hmm. And many times it's not targeted at the staff or the related service providers who are working. It's the fact that the school needs more staff.
Yeah, and I can attest to that because I'm the speech pathologist here. Jen and I met in a program that I was working with, and we became really good friends. And so I was never targeted. There were issues she may have had, right? I mean, just as pertaining to getting the appropriate things for her child, but it was never anybody on our team. Jen was friends with many members of our team. It just shows how all of this is a circle because I'm the related service provider in this scenario with you guys. And yet you guys, I feel closer to than until.
Seriously, I'm sorry to say that, but like,
right.
Really good services.
Yeah. I know. And so that's part of why sometimes I feel like when I'm on this podcast with people, I hear so much of the noise of what's going on right now, especially during these hard times. Economic times are really hard and students are struggling and even just transitions are really hard. And at the same time, I like to look for the glimmers, and you guys offer so many glimmers of hope that you're still going to stand by these students. You're never going to stop. You're never going to back down. I mean, I know 100% you're never going to back down because I've seen you both in action. So, I mean, knowing that there are people like you around that are like really holding up all the students that really need these supports can really show us some hope that no, this isn't over. This game, whatever game it is that everybody's playing back and forth, it's always going to end in the favor of the students.
It may
because
take a while.
You guys will not allow it to just bend the other way. People like you.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Patience. I mean, we have to have a lot of patience. Yeah. I mean, that's part of it is that these things don't happen overnight. But I feel like where we were 30 years ago or 20 years ago,
agreed,
we're in a better place, but we don't want the pendulum to swing the other way, right? And I think that's the fear. I feel like there's a big fear right now of people very concerned that the pendulum is now swinging almost in that other way, that we're going backwards or regressing a bit. I think that's what I hear a lot of that fear, that maybe we're resorting back to not giving as much to kids as we used to, and maybe just putting them in an environment that won't really be supportive of them. And maybe, like Jen had pointed out, the specialized classes, maybe we're overdoing it sometimes because we don't understand what the child truly needs. So it could go either way, but it's just so great that you guys are there in the trenches advocating for everybody, for all, actually. No child left behind, literally. I mean, that's what you guys do every day, is you make sure no child's left behind. But one last thing, where can everybody find you and connect with you?
And you have a website or?
Oh, yeah. I have a website, and on the website, parents can contact me for a free 30-minute consultation. And then I offer workshops.
I would go to your workshop. And she's a special education teacher. Yeah. That's amazing. I had to go to classes to learn an inkling of what she does.
Yeah.
When people pursue something and it doesn't work out, that's for naught. You take all that knowledge and you continue moving forward. You were meant to learn that knowledge so you can apply it where you were meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Anne made a really good point before, because like parents, when they start applying their work skills to advocacy, because like for some reason, I mean, some of my clients are attorneys, or some of my clients work in the Department of Education. And then when they start applying their work skills to their children's advocacy, amazing things could happen.
Oh,
but
yes.
like, that is how much love they have for their child. It is somewhat like clouds your judgment in a way, because like you're so afraid But then once you decide like, okay, this is how I should talk to them because that's how I talk to my staff or that's how I talk to my colleagues. Like we have a meeting and then at the end of the meeting, we make a to-do list and I'm the reminder of that to-do list for everybody. And like, if the school's like, oh, thank you. Thank you for that list because like they don't have any do that for them. So if your parent becomes like the team manager, not the team captain, but the team manager or the team executive assistant, so many good things could happen just by doing that because you're using your skills. Just like Anne said, you're using your work skills. I was like, whoa, wow, so many good things happen. Like just it's hard to even put that two and two together because school isn't a company. They really aren't, you know, but a lot of work skills can still be used.
Yes, absolutely agree.
Yeah. And it's true also that Jen and Anne, that you both were touching upon how, because I was just so in awe that you have such great relationships with all these stakeholders, even though you are fighting for the rights of the students. Not that they're at odds, but sometimes it could get tense, right? Because sometimes they don't have those things available. But I love how, Jen, you said how a lot of times they want to answer your call because sometimes you guys have the best insight into what might be able to be changed. Maybe there's a teacher that needs a mentor and the principal's not aware of it, but you're bringing it to their attention. Maybe there's a training you have available. Like, Anne, you have so many trainings, and I'm going to take your trainings too now that I know you have so many of them. And Jen also does have webinars. But I'm saying it's through those relationships, I think, that are so powerful because then everybody learns from each other. And just to add on one last thing, just because you gave a shout out, Jen, to Anne about the work skills. And Anne once told me a little while back that I may not know it in this moment, but the skills that you learn at one job, you may not think that you're learning specific skills, but when you enter into another job and another role, you're going to realize that the skills that you learned in that role are actually going to transfer over in ways that you never thought possible.
Well, I've lived it.
That was
I've
so
lived
powerful.
it and I've seen it so many times that I...
No, but I'm joking. But yeah, and that was so powerful because it applies to this situation in terms of all these people from different backgrounds advocating and really using their skills. And you don't even realize what you're learning, what soft skills and hard skills you're learning. But for me, I mean, in the moment, it was really relevant for me and really touched my heart. But I want to thank you guys so much again for being here. I know you spent a lot of your evening with me. I think it's a Wednesday evening.
I got to hang out with Aaron.
And I'm just so happy that you guys were able to spend it with me.
I learned stuff today, Aaron.